faith, firearms, freedom. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio. This is episode 21, and I am your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran. Today's episode is sponsored by Cook's Holsters, American-made custom Kydex holsters with a lifetime warranty and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Check out their new products available on the Cook's Holsters online store, including, and this is something I'm excited about, dual ambi magazine carriers. With an adjustable Kydex connector. The connector allows you to wear two mag carriers at the same time and always maintain the distance between the carriers so they don't slide around on your belt. It's adjustable to your liking, and it was inspired by yours truly and Sergeant Bill. Be sure to use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST and get a 15% discount off everything in the store. That's cooksholsters.com. Remember Sergeant Bill's tip last week to pass on what you've learned? Well, I took my wife to the range for the first time this week, and I taught her to draw from a holster and had her shooting on a dynamic range for the first time. It was an absolutely fantastic time. Thank you again, Bill, for a great segment last week. What did you people do to pass on what you've learned recently? Send us an email to armedlutheranradio@gmail.com or drop us a voicemail at 855-54-ARMED and tell us all about it. We'd love to share it on the air. Send us a picture. We'd love to see you and your family out on the range. Well, before we get to the show, I got a couple of life lessons I wanted to pass on from this past week. Last weekend, I went out to the range. I did some live fire practice, getting ready for next weekend's Stars and Stripes Regional IDPA Championship in Tulsa. And at the end of the practice, I decided to run a few rounds through my carry gun. It occurred to me that I hadn't done that in a while. And that's the lesson. If you're into competition, don't overlook practicing with your carry gun and gear, especially if you carry a gun that is dramatically different from the one that you compete with. For example, I compete with a steel-framed, single-action CZ75 SPO1 clone that weighs 43 ounces. I carry a Smith & Wesson M&P Shield. A little bit different. With factory 124 grain self-defense ammo, the gun's a little snappy if you hadn't practiced with it. It surprised me because I had not practiced with it in a while. Shooting is a learned skill, and those skills can erode without practice. So be sure to put as much practice time into your carry gun and gear as you do into your competition gun and gear. And that's my first lesson. And of course, if you've been living in a cave, it is summer. Be sure to adjust your gun and gear accordingly. This weekend in the community where I live, we had a summer fun day at our community pool. It was sunny, 82 degrees and hot. I donned a pair of shorts and a t-shirt and tucked my M&P Shield into a Cook's Holsters IWB, and off we went. Bad idea. Not because there's anything wrong with the holster that I chose, but the gun that I chose. By the time we got there, there was nowhere to sit. Sitting down on the edge of the pool with everybody around me, behind me, in front of me, on the sides, I felt like everybody on earth could tell that I was packing. I decided against taking my pocket gun, the Remington RM380, because it's a little too thick in shorts. With the sticky holster that I use, it tends to be a little bulky in the shorts that I was wearing. It works great in jeans, but not so great in kind of thin summer shorts. If I had a better holster for it, I could have worn it inside the waistband, but its primary role is not as a waistband holster gun, it's a pocket gun. So I felt very, very, very uncomfortable. I'm an introvert anyway, so crowded events like this are like fingernails down a chalkboard for me as it is. But with the added self-consciousness of, worrying about, bending and sitting, and it was awful. So The second lesson today is this: get your summer gun and gear squared away. It's time. That gun that works great in spring, it may not work great in summer. That pocket gun may work fine with your jeans, but it may not work with your shorts. Make sure that you have multiple carry options for your summer gear. If you can, have multiple holsters for different carry positions, inside the waistband, appendix, pocket carry. That'll give you more options with your carry guns. And if none of those work, you might consider trading or selling or buying a new gun to fit that role. Get something that does. So, those are my words of hard-earned wisdom for this week. Here's what we've got on the show for you today. Speaking of carry options, Sergeant Bill has a talk about methods of concealed carry in his Ballistic Minute this week. Aaron Israel of Fundamental Defense has a fantastic tip about preparing for medical emergencies. Hey, you're more likely to have to use a medical kit to treat an emergency like a car accident than you are to actually have to shoot somebody. So great tip about being prepared for that. And he's got some fantastic training opportunities coming up in September that I'll tell you about a little bit later. And following up on Aaron's segment, Pastor Bryan Wolfmueller is with us again, the pastor of Hope Lutheran Church in Aurora, Colorado, and the co-host of Table Talk Radio. He will join us to talk about the 10 Commandments and the call to action in service to our neighbor. All that straight ahead on episode 21 of Armed Lutheran Radio.
Stop! Don't touch! Leave the area! Tell an adult!
The National Rifle Association's Eddie Eagle has taken that message to more than 15 million kids nationwide through a program endorsed by dozens of governors and state legislatures. And gun accident rates today are the lowest ever recorded. For 130 years, we've worked to put safety and freedom first. I'm Wayne LaPierre of the National Rifle Association.
And welcome back. It's time now for a self-defense tip from Aaron Israel of Fundamental Defense.
Hey folks, this is Aaron Israel with Fundamental Defense here with your personal defense tip of the week. This week, I want to talk to you about the importance of carrying a medical kit and getting medical training to go with your kit. I saw a vignette on Facebook from a guy in the shooting industry just the other day who was the first person to arrive on the scene of an accident. And we had a lady who was thrown out of her vehicle and had her leg basically amputated below the knee. Her limb was just kind of hanging off there from hitting the concrete. So he was able to get out of his vehicle, being the first one on the scene, and apply a tourniquet to stop the bleeding. All the while he was applying that tourniquet, he had people screaming at him that 911 said, don't apply a tourniquet, don't do this, because there's still that mythology out there that applying a tourniquet could mean that you lose your leg, which it definitely could, but it's very unlikely. We leave tourniquets on for up to 18 hours in combat, getting people to higher surgical care, and they're still able to keep the limb in most situations. So while you could lose your limb, the risk is pretty slim, and even with that risk being what it is, I would rather not bleed to death and lose my arm or my leg than bleed to death and not have anything to talk about at all. So don't believe that mythology in carrying a tourniquet. The best way to stop a traumatic bleed on an extremity is to put a tourniquet on it, cinch it up high, cinch it up tight, and if one tourniquet doesn't do it, stick another tourniquet on and go with the second one to stop that bleeding. Like my friend Carrie Davis with Dark Angel Medical says, keep the blood in the body. The blood belongs in the body. It is science. And so that's going to be your primary goal when you show up with one of these situations where a person is bleeding out traumatically like they would be after a car accident. So what should go in your medical kit? Well, I carry a pocket medical kit with me everywhere I go, whether I'm on the range or in the vehicle, and I usually have a bigger medical kit inside my vehicle with a little bit more stuff that I'm trained to use. So the first thing, obviously, like I said, is going to be a tourniquet. You want to be able to stop the bleed on extremity. Tourniquet's the best way to do it. Probably a couple tourniquets is better, but definitely one tourniquet. They make SWAT T type. It's basically an elastic band. It's not a great tourniquet, but it'll fit in your pocket, so it's a good tourniquet for carrying in your back pocket. That's what's in my medical kit from darkangelmedical.com, my pocket kit. And then with that tourniquet, you're going to want some kind of a quick clotting agent, which they make this stuff called combat gauze, which is a gauze that's impregnated with a quick clotting chemical that when you stuff it into a wound channel, if you get it close to the source of the bleed, it can help that blood clot up and help to stop that traumatic bleed at the site of the puncture or whatever's causing that bleed. Quick clotting agent, a tourniquet, and then on top of that, you're going to want a pressure dressing of some kind. I like the Israeli bandage. That's what's inside my medical kit. I think it's real easy to use for a pressure dressing. It doesn't take a whole lot of training, and you can do it real quick on the fly without having to use too much fine motor skill to get that tourniquet or to get that pressure dressing on under stress. So I like that Izzy bandage, but there's several different options out there. You choose which one you like based on the training that you need to get. So a quick clotting agent of some kind, a tourniquet, and a pressure dressing. And from there, things I would put in my medical kit, in my vehicle especially for responding to that accident, if I'm the first person on the scene, I'd want some kind of a seatbelt cutting apparatus. Those are real easy to put in your pocket or have in your console or whatever. And then some scissors or a pocket knife or something in case you have to cut away material to get to where you can treat the wound. So scissors, they make the medical type scissors, or just a simple pocket knife would do, so you can cut off someone's jeans or their sleeve or whatever if you needed to get to that skin to apply the tourniquet or the pressure dressing or whatever else you're using. Beyond that, you don't need to go super sexy. I mean, there's no reason for a civilian to have like a chest decompression needle or anything like that. You might have some plastic for treating a sucking chest wound and maybe some duct tape. A roll of duct tape is always useful for those situations where you need to put on those types of dressings. But all of that stuff is real easy and can fit into your back pocket. And like I mentioned before, darkangelmedical.com makes some great pocket medical kits from Carrie Davis there. They're really inexpensive, and they fit right in your back pocket. You can carry with them wherever you go. And then you can get a little bit bigger kit for the car. But medical kits, the kind that you get from Walmart, like with the Band-Aids and the gauze in them, they're not going to help you a whole lot when you show up on the scene of a traumatic accident like that. So you want to have the right stuff to be able to actually stop a traumatic bleed, to get somebody out of the vehicle and render that life-saving first aid if you happen to be the first person there in your position to do it. And obviously with that, like you're always going to hear me harp on, training. You need to get training to use those things or they're not going to do any good for you. So if you don't know how to apply a tourniquet, if you don't know how to do it quickly and under stress, and apply that pressure dressing and stuff in that quick clot into the wound and haven't practiced that with dummies and with scenario training and that sort of thing, then you're not going to be prepared for if you ever have to use them. So LoneStarMedical.com, if you're in Texas, they provide some great medical training in the state of Texas. They also do classes outside the state. Go to PersonalDefenseNetwork.com and check out Caleb Cossey's classes with Lone Star Medics. He's doing several throughout the summer that you can get to. And there's a lot of classes that you can get to where you do shooting and medical stuff at the same time as part of the same class. So those are great classes as well. If you carry a gun but you don't carry a medical kit, you're wrong, in my opinion. You're much more likely, exponentially more likely, to need medical training and the ability to use those medical supplies than you ever are to need to shoot somebody. So you care about personal defense, you ought to care about saving lives, you ought to get that medical kit and carry it with you. You could very easily find yourself as the first responder on the scene of that accident, and you don't want somebody to bleed out when you could have done something to save their life before that ambulance gets there. So that's my tip of the week. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
And by the way, if you would be interested in taking one of Aaron's defensive focus shooting classes, he's got a couple of upcoming classes, July 9th and 10th. You can register for 1 or 2 days. It's defensive focus shooting at the CCC Tactical Range in Crescent, Texas. Go to fundamentaldefense.com and look on the calendar, click on the July 9th date, click register now, and enter the promotional code Lutheran, and you'll get 20% off registration for that event. There's another one coming up September 3rd. It's a 2-day class. The first day is defensive focus shooting, presented by Aaron. The second day is TACMED EDC, provided by Caleb Causey of Lone Star Medics. Both of them are Personal Defense Network contributors and a great value, $400 plus if you use the promo code Lutheran, you get 20% off. So check that out, fundamentaldefense.com.
If you own a gun, you have a full-time responsibility. When you aren't using it, be sure it can't get into the hands of curious children, troubled teenagers, a thief, or anyone else who might misuse it. Your family, friends, and neighbors are all counting on you. Remember, always lock it up. For more information on firearm storage safety, visit ncpc.org. This message brought to you by the National Crime Prevention Council, the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and the Ad Council.
Hi, this is Reverend Ken Blanchard, also known as the Black Man with a Gun, and you're listening to my friend and brother from another mother, the Armed Lutheran.
Welcome back to Armed Lutheran Radio. Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill Silvia.
This is Sergeant Bill with your Ballistic Minute. Today's topic, methods of concealed carry. There are several different methods of concealed carry, including outside the waistband carry, inside the waistband carry, appendix inside the waistband carry, off-body carry, and there's many others that I'm just going to put in the others category that we'll discuss in a minute. Let's start out with outside the waistband. For outside the waistband carry, you're going to need a high-riding holster, and the holster and gun combo shouldn't be too long because you will need to cover it with a concealment garment, and you'll need it to cover the gun in the holster. If it's too long, it pokes out the bottom, it's going to be pretty obvious, hey, that guy's carrying a gun. Now, outside the waistband carry is the most comfortable for long-term carry, but you also need a cover garment that won't fly away, that you won't be adjusting all the time. And don't forget, whatever that cover garment is, a jacket or whatever it may be, you need to leave it on all the time. If you get warm or whatever, you can't take it off because then you're going to be exposing your gun. And now, I live in Texas. We have open carry, but as a law enforcement officer, if you open carry, I think that's kind of crazy. If you're going to do it on your property or out in the country or something like that, that's one thing. But if you're in and around other people, you're just going to make people nervous and or call the police, and it's kind of a hassle. I don't really see the benefits of open carry in that kind of situation, but to each their own. On to in the waistband carry, which is my preferred carry. You're going to need a non-collapsible holster. If you have a leather in the waistband holster, and I had one of those for several years, they just don't work very well. If you ever have to take that gun out and reholster it, it just doesn't work really well. And nylon's even worse. Kydex is rigid and will stay open, and it works pretty dang well. Now, most people wonder where they're going to position it. You got to find somewhere that you can hide it and is also comfortable. You know, that may be in front of the hip, right on the side of the hip, right behind the hip, or even further back. A lot of people will say, I carry 3 o'clock, looking down around your waist. You picture a clock with your navel being 12 o'clock and work around it. There's lots of different positions. Try them all, see what's comfortable for you and what may work. This is kind of an in the waistband carry, but it's called appendix carry. Appendix carry is where you're using an in the waistband holster that is in the front position, somewhere along your center line. If you do that clock deal again, it's somewhere between 10, 11 o'clock all the way over to 2 o'clock. You're going to have that gun right in front of you, in your waistband. You definitely need a non-collapsing holster, something that is going to stay rigid and just won't collapse. Now, there's a comfort issue with appendix carry. Some people find it extremely comfortable. Some people don't find it very comfortable at all. It really kind of depends on your body type. What I found is if you have any kind of belly or gut, appendix carry is not that comfortable. And it doesn't conceal very well because that little bit of gut, or big gut as it may be, will tend to push the butt of the gun out, which will print it against your shirt, and it's pretty obvious, hey, either he's got an alien coming out of his belly or he's got a gun sticking out. And then there's off-body carry, where you put it in, say, your purse or a backpack or a planner. The one big problem with off-body carry is the lack of retention. And I don't mean having a lock on the holster or straps or anything like that. I mean, you're not going to be holding onto that 24/7 while you're carrying. And if you're not, then you are not protecting and retaining that gun, which can be dangerous. It can get stolen. And the last thing we want is your gun taken from you and then used on you. My other big issue with off-body carry is that it's a very slow access. It's really hard to get to that gun. And if it's in a purse or a backpack or something like that, it's not usually going to be in the same place. My in the waistband holster is in the almost exact same place every time I reach for it, every time I wear it. That consistency makes getting that gun out much easier, much faster. Okay, in the last category, the others. This includes the cross draw, the shoulder holster, the small of the back, ankle holsters, and pocket holsters. Okay, cross draw, small of the back, and shoulder holsters. Dumb. Sorry. Hope I don't offend you if you love your cross draw holster, but a cross draw holster just means I can grab the gun easier than you can. A shoulder holster just means that you want to be a cop, and to be honest with you, 99% of cops don't carry shoulder holsters. Small of the back is even worse. Try sitting down, driving a car. No bueno. I wear the Batman belt 5 days a week, and believe me, there is nothing on the back of this belt. Nothing of any size, because it hurts. Now, an ankle holster has a little bit more merit. If you're wearing pants, you can have it on all the time. It's always in the same spot. It's a little harder to get to. It's the kind of concealed carry that if you're gonna have an ankle holster, it's probably going to be a smaller gun, but you need to practice going for it, getting it, and getting that draw, because it's not an easy thing to do, and it needs some work. Last but not least is the pocket holster. Now, for pocket carry, like I said, use a pocket holster. Just putting a gun in your pocket is going to lead to bad things. If you ever take your pocket on your jeans or your shorts or pants, whatever you may be wearing, and you turn them out, you'd be amazed what crap is floating around in there. It doesn't take a whole lot to jam up or gum up a pistol and keep it from working. And I don't care if it's a revolver, they can have problems and get jammed up too. And when a revolver cylinder gets jammed up, you might as well throw it at them, because that is no longer a working tool of self-defense. But on the positive side, pocket carry will allow you to have a gun. It's not horrible, but you're only going to have small guns. So small guns are usually harder to shoot. They're harder to get a grip on. They're not as much fun to shoot. They're not as comfortable to shoot. But that being said, if you're going to have a pocket gun for whatever the case may be, whatever the scenario is, you need to get that little bitty gun out to the range, get some practice with it. Maybe look at getting an extended magazine or a finger rest on the base plate of the magazine or something so you can get more of a grip on it, get a better hold on it, better grips, or whatever it is, depending on what gun you have. And that can also depend on the choice you have for that. If you were pocket carrying, say, a little .32 auto and you can't really get a good grip on it, well, maybe it's time to bump up to a .380 or a 9mm, like a Glock 42, 43 maybe, with an extended magazine base plate, so you got a finger rest. I don't know. They're just ideas. There's J-frames, and there's all kinds of stuff, and even those sometimes will have really small grips, and they're really hard to get a hold of. And the most important thing after your trigger press in shooting a gun is, well, maybe your sight picture, but holding on to it. Because if you can't grip it, you can't hold on to it, you can't control it, you can't continue shooting or even make a good shot. Most longtime concealed carriers will tell you that they have a box full of holsters somewhere. I'm included in that. And I have police holsters as well, too, so I have multiple boxes. And I have a wife that's a police officer and carries, so there's big boxes. But that being said, that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes you need to experiment, try out different holsters, and see what works for you. And what may work for you today may not work for you tomorrow. You spend a lot of money on a quality firearm. You probably spend a lot of money on ammunition and training. Spend a little bit more money on a good quality holster from a good maker. Something that's going to be comfortable, that you will carry that gun all the time, so it will be there when you need it. Also, don't forget, get out there and try in practice, or go shoot an IDPA match and use your carry gear, use your carry gun. Really ring it out and see what works and what doesn't. This has been your Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill.
So you have your concealed carry permit or license to carry. Now what? Now you need a good holster. Not one of those cheap neoprene prophylactic holsters you can buy in the big box stores. You need a holster custom built for the firearm you intend to carry every day. Check out cooksholsters.com. Made in the USA, Cooks holsters are available in a wide range of colors and designs for inside the waistband or outside waistband carry. They carry a lifetime warranty against defects and a 100% satisfaction guaranteed. Visit www.cooksholsters.com and use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST and take 15% off everything in the store. You put in the time and effort to legally carry a firearm for personal protection. Protect your firearm with a custom holster from cooksholsters.com.
Pistols, prayer, and potluck. You're listening to Armed Lutheran Radio.
This next story comes from WTXF, Fox 29 in Philadelphia. You might have seen this story a couple of weeks ago. An alarming video of a woman being beaten on a city street while a crowd of people watches came to us via a Fresco News user. We immediately called police and tried to identify the victim and get answers about what happened. It was a disturbing scene Thursday morning in 200 block of Ontario Street in the city's Kensington neighborhood. Stop by and say hello. The man who shot the video of a brutal beating on the sidewalk does not want his face shown, but did talk to us, says Fox 29. The guy was actually on top of the girl, just beating on her, the witness told Fox 29. The woman is on the ground, and you can see the man repeatedly slapping and punching the victim. I did hear a commotion earlier. I didn't pay no mind, and then I came out, and the guy was on top of the girl, the witness explained. The witness who shot the video says the beating went on for some time. He says maybe 20 to 30 minutes. Did anyone try to help the woman? Fox 29 asked. No one. Just bystanders, smiling, laughing. Just standing around like a normal day, like nothing was even happening, the witness said. You can see from the video that no one tries to intervene or help the woman. People are on their cell phones and just watching her being beaten. We don't know if they were possibly afraid for their own safety. We do know someone on the block did call police. I didn't want to jump in and be a hero and just get hurt, you know. It's bad out here, the man said. This reminded me of a fiery car accident in Dallas in 2014 where bystanders watched as the victims of that crash burned to death. And we've seen this before. It's not an unprecedented event. It's shocking to consider that society is broken down to such a degree that nobody will step in and help a neighbor in need. Jesus speaks of this in the parable of the Good Samaritan. All too often we see the priest and the Levite passing by on the other side and doing nothing to help. And as we know, society breaks down to two kinds of people, sheepdog and sheep. As government grows bigger and bigger, more and more sheep join the herd, waiting for other people to step in and do something. Like the man said in the story, I didn't want to jump in and be the hero. Pastor Bryan Wolfmueller of Hope Lutheran Church in Aurora, Colorado, and the co-host of Table Talk Radio joins us again to discuss the concept of sheepdogs and sheep. And as Aaron Israel points out in today's self-defense tip, if you carry a gun, you should carry a medical kit. Because if you don't, you're wrong. You're just stupid. You're more likely to need to stop and render aid, medical aid, to some stranger than you are to need your gun to shoot someone. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't carry a gun. But you should be prepared to help deal with the traumatic accidents and emergencies that pop up, whether it's a gun or a tourniquet or a Band-Aid or some quick clot. You should be prepared to deal with it. Pastor, thanks for joining us again. When emergencies or unexpected violence come upon us, you say that the regular order of the world breaks down, and the Ten Commandments call us as Christians to action in service to our neighbors. Tell us a little more about that.
There's an old saying, and I don't know where this comes from, and I'd like to find it. I think it comes from the ancient classical world, but it's brought into a lot of Christian ethical discussion. And the saying is this: emergency knows no necessity. So that when you're in an emergency situation, when someone's life is being threatened, when there's violence, when there's accidents, when someone is brought to the edge of their life, now the regular ordering of the world begins to break down. So if I'm driving along and I'm with my kids and I'm a father and I'm a automobile driver and I'm all these other sort of things, but if I now come across an accident, now all of a sudden I'm a doctor. If I'm just walking along with Carrie, I'm a husband and things are normal, but we come across some sort of violent fight, now all of a sudden I'm a policeman. In other words, the regular ordering of things breaks down, and we're called to act in those sorts of situations. Now that's tricky because we're acting in a lot of ways outside of our own vocations. So I'm not trained to be a doctor or an EMT. I'm not trained to be a policeman. But the emergency situation demands that kind of activity out of order. And those are often particularly difficult situations.
What does it say about society today that we see so many of these examples where people are in need and their neighbors stand around, like the crash that I mentioned in 2014, where people just simply stood around and wouldn't even go get a bottle of water to throw on the victims. They simply stood around and watched and waited for somebody else and took video, or this example in Philadelphia where everyone watched this woman being beaten.
There's a way that that one of the, and I've seen these kind of videos where they explore these sorts of things, and one of the things that's really interesting is that for example, if you break down out in the middle of the desert and there's nobody around, there's a pretty good chance that a person who comes along is going to stop and help. But if you break down in the middle of the city, then nobody stops to help because everyone figures, oh, somebody else will do it. So 1 million people pass you and no one stops and stops to help. There's a way that as we live closer and closer together, that we get absorbed more and more in on ourselves. And that's one of the marks of kind of our modern industrialized society. And I think as Christians, we want to be fighting against that we, in fact, do look around for people who need our help, and we are trying to help them in as wise a way as we possibly can. But again, when someone needs the help of a stranger, then things have really broken down. So I mean, I think about this every time you stop at the stoplight and I see that, there's someone begging for food on the corner, and I think, how many things have gone wrong that person is there? And the situation is bad no matter what. I mean, maybe they're just stealing from me. They don't actually, it's just scam for them.
Right.
They just want to get money without working. Or maybe things are so bad in their life that they actually have to shame themselves and stand there on the corner. But either way, it's not good.
Right. In your recent episodes of Grappling with the Text, seen on the Worldview Everlasting YouTube channel, by the way, you talked about the shape of love for the neighbor that is defined by the Ten Commandments. You talk about how this love is not like the touchy-feely, lavender-scented love of romantic love. It's one that calls us to action. It's one that places requirements on us as Christians. What did you mean by that?
Well, the old King James used the word charity, and I think that's right because it has the sense of action. So Jesus says that love is a giving up of your life, a laying down of your life. No one has greater love than this, than to lay down his life for his friend.
Right.
So that the giving up of our own selves, the act of service, is really what love is. Now, maybe there's a couple of things here to say. The first is that love takes up on a different shape depending on my vocation. So my love for my children in my vocation as father looks different than my love for the members of the church in my vocation as pastor.
Right.
But that all looks different than my love for my neighbor that lives down the street from me, than my love for Carrie, my wife. So love takes a different shape depending on the vocation that we have. Mm-hmm. And these vocations give a different sort of obligations. So my obligation to Carrie and to my children is it's a weightier obligation even than my obligation to serve the people at church. And that obligation is a weightier obligation than the people that I live next to in my neighborhood, or this sort of thing. So that proximity in vocation also brings with it a more of a burden. But that proximity in vocation can be overcome by the kind of immediacy of my neighbor's need. So for example, I have an obligation to take care of Isaac's skinned knee if he falls down and scrapes his knee. Now, it's not a big deal, but he's my boy.
Right.
And so I'm obliged to take care of that. I'm not obliged to take care of every skinned knee in the state of Colorado. But if I'm walking along and there's a person that falls and cracks open their head, well, they're a complete stranger, but the profound need of that situation brings an obligation to me. So even if someone is a complete stranger, and yet their proximity and the depth of their need is now going to require my love, and my love now becomes it takes the shape of the person's need. Now, I think that when I experienced this perhaps most acutely is I've been at a couple of car accidents. Mm-hmm. One where a guy crashed a motorcycle into a tree and broke his neck, and I was waiting with him while the ambulance was on the way. Another, a gal flipped her car way out in the woods, and we were there for my brother's wedding, and in fact we were about to start the wedding, but I laid with her. She was suspended and pinned in the car, hanging upside down for about 30 minutes before the police were able to arrive. And I was there in the car with her, and so the first thing in both situations is you try to see if there's anything you can do to stop the bleeding, to comfort the person. You don't want to move them if they've got broken necks or things like this. So you're trying to comfort them. But then once those immediate sort of things are there, and now you're waiting, now I can in fact talk to them as a Christian. And I said in both cases, I asked if they were baptized, and they both were baptized. And so I was able, as they were worried and shaking and crying and waiting and afraid, I was able to give them the comfort that they belong to Jesus, that He's claimed them, and in life and in death, they are the Lord's. And so we're in the second situation, we were able to pray the Lord's Prayer as she hung upside down in the car, and this sort of thing, so that even if we have a stranger, the great need that they have now is compelling to us to come and to love, and that love takes the form of action. Right.
Great. That's beautiful. All right. Thank you for that.
Yeah, Lord, you got it, man. My pleasure.
Blessings on your day. We'll talk to you again soon, I hope.
Yep, that sounds great. Take care.
Thanks. And that's going to wrap it up for another episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. Thank you for listening. I want to thank our contributors this week, Aaron Israel from Fundamental Defense, Sergeant Bill Silvia for his Ballistic Minute, and of course, Pastor Bryan Wolfmueller of Hope Lutheran Church in Aurora, Colorado. Thank you all for your contributions to this week's show. And thank you for listening. Stay tuned next time for another episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. Keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.com. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @ArmedLutheran. And like us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/thearmedlutheran. You can contact us by email at armedlutheranradio@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 855-54-ARMED. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio.